Hi, welcome to the channel. Last year, the first video I made on this channel was a video about what I think is one of the best budget tents you can buy, which is the Nordisk Svalbard 1 PU version. So the PU version is a slightly heavier polyester version of this very, very strong little tent. I got it for about £125 last year. Prices have gone up now like everything else, but I still think if you're looking for a really good, strong one-person tent, this is an excellent option because it is wind tested up to 90 miles an hour. It's one of sort of Nordisk's most robust little tents. Weighs in at 2 kilos, really well spec'd in terms of waterproof and all the rest of it. And at the time, I made a second video which looked at the Nordisk Svalbard 1 PU versus the SI version, which was the more expensive, lighter weight seal nylon version of the same tent. So a lot of Nordisk tents are exactly the same. They have a PU version, which is the heavier materials of polyester, and an SI version, which has a few upgrades. So I have finally snagged myself the SI version of the Svalbard one from Facebook for £150 in really good condition. So I figured I would redo my second video on this channel, which was a comparison of the two tents, because now I can actually show you both tents, whereas rather than just showing you the PU and talking about the SI. So I have got both the tents in my hands now. So as to be expected, the pack size on the SI version is smaller and it is lighter at 1.7 kilos versus 2 kilos. It's got upgraded poles, upgraded pegs, upgraded guy lines, a higher rating on the ground sheet, 10,000 millimeters versus 8,000. The hydraulic heads on the outer at 3,000 millimeters, exactly the same. But yeah, they do feel quite different in terms of bulk. And if you wanted to take them out of their original bags and pack them down into separate dry bags, I suspect the SI version is going to just be a lot smaller, because the PU version, absolutely solid little tent, but the materials are really thick and chunky, so they're not very compressible. Whereas obviously with the SI fly sheet and this one here, you can see that it's got a lot more ability to pack right down. So even though the pack size isn't that different, if you look on the website, the pack size in reality is really significantly different. So now I am lucky enough to have both the tents with me. We'll pitch the inner of both tents. They're both inner pitch first, and I'll just talk you through briefly the main sort of technical differences of the two tents, because from a design point of view, size, all the rest of it, they are identical. There we have it, that's the two inners pitch. So you can see, in terms of design, space, size, they are identical tents, just with obviously very different material. So it's really noticeable when you pitch them both side by side, just how different those materials are. So the SI version, the more expensive version, materials are much thinner, much lighter, and despite the fact the ground sheet's got a higher rating, 10,000 mil on this one versus 8,000 on the PU version, the ground sheet actually feels of a thinner material as well. The PU version is an absolute beast. The ground sheet just feels incredibly robust and solid. I did actually buy the original footprint for the tent, largely because back in the day I was really obsessed with keeping the ground sheet of the tent clean, and then just using the footprint and clean that when you get home. But I realised with this tent, you just really don't feel like you need it, because it's got such a robust ground sheet. The ground sheet in this, even though it's better spec'd in terms of hydraulic head, does feel much less weighty in terms of material. It doesn't feel as robust, but obviously that's just the thickness of the material. It doesn't actually say anything about how strong it is. The tent poles, yes, noticeably a little bit thicker on the SI version, because they're the DAC Featherlight NSL ones. Quality does feel better, I'll be honest about that. These Nordisk ones feel, I mean, they feel absolutely fine, but they feel a lot like the tent poles you get with your standard tents all over the place, which is probably because of what they are. There's definitely a higher feeling of quality on the DAC poles. They sit much better, so the connections are really tight. The connections on a couple of the Nordisk ones don't look quite perfect. There's a tiny little gap between them and stuff, which you don't get with a DAC pole, so that definitely feels better. And I actually think the SI version is slightly easier to pitch. I can't seem to get this bit quite pitched taut. Whichever way I move it around, this doesn't seem to quite sit right. Whereas with the SI version, it's absolutely bang on, just with a really quick just pegging it round. So that is something that's noticeably better. In terms of like zips and stuff, I suspect all the zips are the same. They all look and feel the same. They've both got the option to have a solid door or just a mesh door and stuff. So it is actually quite a warm tent. So it's not sort of designed for, or sold as a 4-season tent, because obviously it doesn't have the snow skirts. But I think certainly the lack of mesh and the fact you can choose a solid door would make it quite a warm tent for winter, and it's certainly built for bad weather and high winds. Yeah, colour differences obviously, different materials, different colours. But yeah, the tent pegs on the SI version are much better as well. I know that's not really a deal breaker for most people, because most people upgrade the tent pegs anyway, or they've got their own sort of sets which they'll use with all their tents. But yeah, I think you can definitely tell just from pitching the inner that that the SI is a more expensive tent. But in terms of budget tents, I've had a couple of really good sleeps in this tent. It's a really, really nice tent, don't get me wrong. But I was always tempted to see what would it be like to upgrade to the SI version. So if we stick the outers on now, we'll start to see the differences in colours between them. That's the outwards pitch. As you can see, the SI version is a much darker green, and the PU version is kind of olive green. I think they both sit in the landscape fairly well. If I was going to pick one as being the best where we're currently pitched on a sort of standard kind of hillside, then I think the olive probably blends in slightly better. But if you're going somewhere with a bit more dark green, then this is going to be absolutely fine anyway. But it's not much of muchness really. So you can see the PU version has slightly thicker and heavier guy lines. The SI has got better rated guy lines, thinner ones, stronger material. Different sliders, so these are the standard sliders that Nordisk use with this kind of guy line. I've got a couple of Voss tarps that are exactly the same SI material as this. They use the same guy lines, they use the same sliders. So these sliders on the PU version are the Nordisk sort of little alu sliders, so quite different in that sense. But you can see really the idea is exactly the same. It's just, you pay your money, you choose between the different materials. Obviously, a benefit of the PU version is it's completely steam sealed and waterproof. As soon as you buy it, 3,000mm hydraulic head. The Nordisk one, the seams are supposed to be folded and stitched in a way that when it does rain, they expand slightly and keep water out. But obviously, to be fully waterproof, you would need to seam seal it. What I will do is, if we get any heavy rain forecasts, I'll probably pitch it in the garden as it is, because it's not been seam sealed. Leave it out overnight and see how waterproof it is. And obviously, if it lets in too much water, I'll get some seam seal and I'll just go across all of the main seams and seal it. So yeah, that was one of the reasons I also fancied the PU version, because at the time I was like, I really don't fancy the job of seam sealing a tent, but I've done it on my Lanshan 2 Pro, so I don't have any issues doing it with this one. It is what it is. It's one of the drawbacks of getting sealed nylon is that they're very rarely seam sealed at the factories, so you do have to go through that. So yeah, hopefully this video has been a little bit helpful in terms of seeing the main differences between the two tents. So obviously I'll drop in the description any details I might not have covered, but I think obviously having pitched them inner, had a look around, and the outer, have a look around, I think I've covered the main differences. So yeah, 3,000mm hydraulic head, 3,000mm hydraulic head, 8,000mm on the ground sheet, 10,000 on this ground sheet, 2 kilograms versus 1.7 kilograms. Pack sizes, if you look online on the Nordisk website, are pretty similar, but actually in reality, having literally had the two packs in my hand next to each other, the pack size on this has a potential to be a lot smaller than the pack size on this. You can just, from the outer material itself, it packs down so much smaller than the polyester, which is big and stiff and all the rest of it, and the same with the inner as well. The inner on this one here feels like it can pack down a lot smaller than the inner on that one there. The ground sheet on the PE version is an absolute beast. There are other benefits and drawbacks, I suppose, of the PU. The PE material doesn't absorb water and sag in the rain, so if you're in a heavy rainstorm, you could just sleep it out in this tent, it's going to be absolutely fine. Whereas in a silk nylon tent, really in an ideal world, you've got to get out and tighten the guy lines and tweak it a bit, because it is going to start sagging in the rain. So, you know, there are definitely benefits and drawbacks to both materials, and if you do visit Nordisk website, they will talk about that. It's not just a case of this is a superior material, superior tent. You know, there are definitely advantages of having a PU tent, and I think the PU is a lot more resistant to UV rays as well. So if you're pitching a lot in the summer, if you were campsite pitching, I'm not sure why you'd use a one-person tent for campsite pitching, but you might well do, and you're leaving the tent up all day whilst you're out and about and stuff, then this would be a better bet for that kind of thing. If you wanted to go as light as possible wild camping, then this is a better option. There's only 300 grams in it, but this one will pack a lot smaller. You'll get it into a couple of separate dry bags, really nice and compact. And I really do like the pegs and the poles on this tent. They do feel a cut above the PU version. So for me, obviously, when I had this choice, before I started my YouTube channel, when I had the choice with the two tents, I went for the PU version because A, it was cheaper, I had a good deal at about £125, and B, it didn't need to be seam sealed. The lack of seam sealing on the SI version really put me off. But yeah, I think now I literally own both of them. I am going to sell the PU and I'm going to keep this tent just because it's just a little bit lighter. And if I'm being 100% honest, because I've got some Voss SI Nordisk tarps exactly the same colour, it'll work really well. Whereas with this tent, they'll look a little bit odd. If you've got any further questions about either of the tents, or you want my opinion on anything that I've not mentioned in the video, just drop a comment and I'll 100% get back to you. But yeah, if you've enjoyed the video, drop it a like. If you enjoy seeing used tents and different tents and all the rest of it, then do subscribe to the channel. And yeah, I'll be covering lots more in future. So big thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.